The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Promise Creek as Yates Xavier rode in, his weathered face grim beneath his Stetson, a worn leather Bible clutched in his calloused hand as if it were more precious than gold. It was all he had left of Abigail, that, and the hollow ache in his chest where his heart used to be. The year was 1878, and the West was still wild enough to swallow a man whole if he wasn't careful. Yates had learned that lesson the hard way. His boots hit the ground with a thud as he dismounted outside the town's only saloon, tucking the Bible carefully inside his coat before pushing through the swinging doors. Inside, the piano played a tinny tune while men gathered around tables, cards and whiskey flowing freely. Yates kept to himself, ordering a drink and finding a corner table where he could sit with his back to the wall, an old habit from years of watching his own trail. The whiskey burned down his throat, but it couldn't touch the cold emptiness inside him. "You're new," said a female voice, soft but direct. Yates looked up to see a woman with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She wasn't dressed like the saloon girls, instead wearing a simple blue dress with her honey-brown hair pulled back in a practical bun. "Just passing through," he replied, his voice rough from disuse. "I'm Amelia Matthews," she said, not waiting for an invitation before sitting across from him. "I run the general store down the street." Yates nodded, not offering his name in return. He wasn't looking for conversation, but something about the directness in her gaze made him uncomfortable in a way he couldn't explain. "Most men come to town looking for something," she continued, unperturbed by his silence. "What brings you to Promise Creek, Mr. Xavier?" "Yates Xavier," he conceded. "And I'm not looking for anything, just a place to rest before moving on." She nodded, studying him with those penetrating eyes. "Well, Mr. Xavier, if you need supplies before moving on, my store opens at 7. She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Good evening." As she walked away, Yates noticed the Bible had slipped partially from his coat. He quickly tucked it back in, his fingers lingering on the worn leather cover. That night, in a sparse room above the saloon, Yates lay awake staring at the ceiling. The Bible rested on his chest, a familiar weight. He'd carried it for 3 years now, across 5 territories, through mountain passes and desert flats. It was Abigail's Bible, with her delicate handwriting in the margins and pressed wildflowers marking favorite passages. His wife had loved that Bible more than any possession. Now it was all he had left of her, that and the memories that haunted his dreams. Morning came with harsh sunlight through thin curtains. Yates rose, washed his face in the basin, and prepared to face another day. The Bible went into his coat pocket, close to his heart, where it always stayed. After a meager breakfast, he decided to visit the general store, not because of the woman Amelia, but because he genuinely needed supplies. The bell above the door jingled as he entered. "Good morning, Mr. Xavier," Amelia called from behind the counter. Her hair was in the same practical bun, but today she wore a green dress that brought out flecks of gold in her brown eyes. "Madam," he nodded, moving to examine the shelves of canned goods. "Restocking for the trail?" she asked, coming around to stand near him. "Yes." He selected a few cans of beans, some coffee, and hardtack. "Where are you headed, if you don't mind my asking?" Yates hesitated. "West." A smile touched her lips. "That's rather vague. There's a lot of west out there." For the first time in months, Yates felt the corner of his mouth twitch in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "I suppose there is." As he reached for a bag of coffee on a high shelf, the Bible slipped from his coat and fell to the floor. Before he could retrieve it, Amelia had bent down and picked it up. "You dropped this," she said, holding it out. Yates took it quickly, perhaps too quickly because her eyebrows rose slightly. "Must be important," she observed. "It is," he said simply, tucking it back into his coat. "My father was a preacher," she said conversationally as she moved back behind the counter to tally his purchases. "I grew up surrounded by Bibles. Never seen a man carry one so close, though, unless he was a preacher himself." "I'm no preacher," Yates said gruffly. "No, I didn't think so." She wrapped his purchases in brown paper. "That'll be $1.35. He paid and turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Mr. Xavier, we're having a town social tomorrow evening. Nothing fancy, just some music and food at the schoolhouse." "You're welcome to join us if you're still in town." Yates hesitated at the door. "Thank you, but I'll likely be gone by then." Her smile was knowing. "Well, the invitation stands if your plans change." Back in his room, Yates laid out his supplies and realized he'd forgotten ammunition for his revolver. Cursing under his breath, he decided he'd have to return to the store later. For now, he stretched out on the bed, the Bible on his chest, and closed his eyes. Sleep came unexpectedly, and with it, dreams of Abigail. In his dream, she was reading from her Bible, her voice melodic and soothing as it had been in life. But when he looked at her face, it was blurred and fading, like a photograph left too long in the sun. He woke with a start, heart pounding, reaching instinctively for the Bible. It was there, solid and real. He opened it, running his fingers over the handwritten notes in the margins. "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart," Abigail had written beside Proverbs 3:5, "even when the path seems dark." Yates closed the Bible and his eyes, fighting the tide of emotion that threatened to overwhelm him. After a moment, he stood, composed himself, and headed back to the general store for ammunition. The store was busy this time, with several townspeople milling about. Amelia was helping an elderly woman select fabric, so Yates made his way to the counter where a young man was minding the register. "Can I help you, sir?" the clerk asked. "Need bullets. .45 caliber," Yates said, placing coins on the counter. The young man nodded and turned to the shelf behind him. Yates waited, acutely aware of Amelia's voice as she spoke with the elderly customer. There was something warm and genuine in her tone, something he hadn't heard in a long time. "Here you are, sir," the clerk said, placing a box of ammunition on the counter. As Yates reached for it, he felt someone bump into him from behind. The Bible dislodged from his coat and clattered to the floor. "Sorry, mister," a young boy apologized, bending to pick it up. "I'll take that," Yates said quickly, but not before the boy had opened it. "Who's Abigail?" the boy asked, looking at the inscription inside the front cover. Yates snatched the Bible from the boy's hands, perhaps more roughly than he'd intended. "No one," he said, the lie burning his throat. He became aware of silence in the store and looked up to see several people, including Amelia, watching him. Her expression was unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, pity, perhaps, or understanding, that made him want to flee. Pocketing the ammunition, he strode quickly from the store, the bell jangling harshly behind him. That evening, Yates sat in the saloon, nursing a whiskey and contemplating leaving town at first light. Promise Creek was stirring too many memories, asking too many questions. This seat taken. He looked up to see Amelia standing there, a small glass of sherry in her hand. Without waiting for his answer, she sat across from him. "I don't need company," he said. "Maybe not. But sometimes company finds us anyway." She sipped her sherry. "The boy Tommy didn't mean any harm today." Yates stared into his whiskey. "I know that. Abigail," she said softly. "Is that your wife?" His head snapped up. "Was," he corrected, the word like a stone in his mouth. "She was my wife." Amelia nodded, not pushing further. They sat in silence for a moment before she spoke again. "I lost my husband in the war, Confederate bullet at Gettysburg." Yates looked at her with new understanding. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago, 7 years. She traced the rim of her glass. "Time doesn't heal all wounds, but it teaches us to carry them better." Yates said nothing, but something in her words resonated with him. They sat in companionable silence for a while before Amelia stood. "The social is still on for tomorrow night," she said. 8 o'clock at the schoolhouse." "I'm still planning to leave in the morning," he replied. Her smile was gentle. "Of course, safe travels, Mr. Xavier." But when morning came, Yates found himself reluctant to saddle his horse and ride out. Something about Promise Creek, or perhaps someone, was making him hesitate. He told himself he could use one more day of rest, one more night in a real bed before continuing his aimless journey. The day passed slowly. Yates spent it walking the perimeter of the small town, observing the people going about their business. It was a peaceful place, the kind of town where folks left their doors unlocked and neighbors helped neighbors. As evening approached, he found himself cleaning up, trimming his beard, and considering Amelia's invitation. Before he could talk himself out of it, he was walking toward the schoolhouse, the Bible secure in his coat pocket. The schoolhouse glowed with lantern light, and the sound of a fiddle drifted through the open windows. Inside, tables had been pushed to the edges of the room, laden with food, while the center space was cleared for dancing. Children darted between adults and laughter filled the air. Yates hesitated at the entrance, feeling out of place among all this easy joy. He was about to turn and leave when he heard his name. "Mr. Xavier, you came." Amelia approached, dressed in a blue gown that was fancier than her usual attire. Her hair was down, flowing around her shoulders in honey-brown waves. "Thought I'd stop by before heading out tomorrow," he said, suddenly self-conscious. "I'm glad you did. Come, there's plenty of food and Sheriff Thompson has been asking about the new face in town." Before he could protest, she had linked her arm through his and was guiding him into the crowd. The next hour was a blur of introductions, small talk, and more genuine smiles than Yates had seen or given in years. "You clean up nice, Cowboy," Amelia said as they stood by the punch bowl. "Almost didn't recognize you without the trail dust." Yates felt his face warm. "Don't get many occasions to dress up on the trail." "What do you do out there anyway? You've never said," he shrugged. "This and that, ranch work when I can find it, hunting, tracking sometimes for the army or settlers." "Sounds lonely," she observed. "It can be," he admitted, "but it suits me." The fiddle started up again, a lively tune that had couples moving to the center of the room. "Would you care to dance?" Amelia asked boldly when he didn't. Yates was taken aback. "I haven't danced in a long time." "It's like riding a horse," she said with a smile. "You never really forget how." Before he could come up with an excuse, she had taken his hand and led him to the dance floor. As they joined the other couples, Yates felt the Bible press against his chest from inside his coat, a familiar weight, almost like a hand on his heart. Dancing with Amelia was easier than he expected. She moved gracefully, and her smile was infectious. For a few moments, Yates felt the weight he'd been carrying lighten just a fraction. The evening continued with more dancing, more conversation, and a slow realization that he was actually enjoying himself. When it was time to leave, Yates found himself walking Amelia home, the night air cool and the stars brilliant above them. "Thank you for coming tonight," she said as they reached her small house behind the general store. "Thank you for inviting me," he replied, surprised to find he meant it. They stood in awkward silence for a moment before Amelia spoke again. "You're still planning to leave tomorrow?" Yates nodded. At first light, she studied his face in the moonlight. "You know, Yates, whatever you're running from, it follows you. Believe me, I've tried running too." Before he could respond, she had risen on tiptoe and pressed a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Good night," she whispered, and then she was gone, the door closing softly behind her. Yates stood there for a long moment, his hand unconsciously touching the spot where her lips had been. Then, with a sigh, he turned and walked back to the hotel, the Bible a familiar weight against his heart. That night, Yates dreamed of Abigail again. But this time, when he looked at her face, it was clear. She was smiling, reading from her Bible, and when she looked up at him, there was peace in her eyes. "It's time to live again, Yates," she said, her voice as clear as if she were truly there beside him. "I've been waiting for you to hear that." He woke with tears on his face and the Bible clutched in his hands. Outside, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was time to leave Promise Creek, to continue his journey to nowhere. But as he packed his meager belongings and prepared to check out, Yates found himself hesitating. Abigail's voice from his dream echoed in his mind. It's time to live again. For 3 years, he'd been existing, not living. Moving from place to place, never staying long enough to form connections, carrying his grief and Abigail's Bible like twin burdens. On impulse, Yates left his saddlebags in the room and walked to the general store. It wasn't open yet, but he saw a light on in the back. He knocked on the door. After a moment, Amelia appeared, looking surprised to see him. "Yates, I thought you'd be gone by now." "I'm still leaving," he said quickly. "But I wanted to say goodbye properly and thank you." Her expression softened. "You're welcome, though I'm not sure what you're thanking me for." "For the invitation last night, for the conversation, for..." He hesitated, then reached into his coat and pulled out the Bible. "For making me remember there's more to life than just remembering." Amelia's gaze fell to the Bible in his hands. "That's hers, isn't it?" "Abigail's," Yates nodded. "My wife," She died 3 years ago. Cholera took her while I was away working a cattle drive. By the time I got back, she was already in the ground." Amelia's eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm so sorry, Yates. This Bible was everything to her. She read it every day, wrote in it. Kept flowers from everywhere we lived." His voice grew rough with emotion. "After she died, I couldn't bear to read it, but I couldn't bear to leave it behind either, so I've been carrying it for 3 years. It's a beautiful way to keep her memory close," Amelia said softly. Yates shook his head. "It's not just memory I've been carrying, it's guilt. I wasn't there when she needed me most. I've been punishing myself, wandering without purpose, carrying her Bible but never opening it, never allowing myself to find peace." The confession hung in the air between them. Amelia reached out and gently touched his arm. "And now," he looked into her eyes, seeing understanding there and something else that made his heart beat a little faster. "Now I think maybe it's time to stop wandering." A smile bloomed on her face. "Promise Creek is a good place to settle if you're of a mind to." "I might be," he admitted, "if there's room for a man with my skills. Oh, I imagine we could find something for a man who can hunt, track, and even dance when properly motivated," she teased gently. Yates felt a smile, a real one, tug at his lips. "In that case, maybe I'll stick around for a while, see how it feels to stay in one place again." Amelia's expression grew serious. "And the Bible," he looked down at the worn leather in his hands. "I think it's time I read it, really read it. The way Abigail would have wanted." "That sounds like a good start," she said. As the sun climbed higher in the morning sky, Yates Xavier made a decision that would change the course of his life. He would not be riding out of Promise Creek that day. Instead, he would begin the harder journey of learning to live again, with Abigail's Bible as his guide and the possibility of a new beginning lighting his path. Over the next few weeks, Yates found reasons to stay in Promise Creek. The sheriff needed help tracking some rustlers. The livery stable owner needed an extra hand breaking horses. The saloon needed a bouncer on Saturday nights. Small jobs, but enough to keep him busy and justify his continued presence in town. And then there was Amelia. They fell into an easy friendship, taking walks together in the evenings, sharing meals at the small cafe, occasionally meeting for coffee in the morning before she opened the store. Yates found himself looking forward to these times, enjoying her quick wit and practical wisdom. One evening, as they sat on the bench outside her store watching the sunset, Amelia asked about the Bible. "Have you read it yet?" "Abigail's Bible," Yates hesitated. I've started from the beginning, Genesis. It's harder than I expected." "Because of her notes," he nodded. "Her handwriting is everywhere. Little thoughts, questions, prayers. It's like hearing her voice again." Amelia was quiet for a moment. "You loved her very much." "I did," Yates confirmed. "She was everything to me." "Tell me about her," Amelia said, her voice gentle, "if you want to." Yates took a deep breath and began to speak. He told Amelia how he'd met Abigail at a church social in Missouri, how her laugh had captivated him from the first moment, how they'd married young and headed west with dreams of their own ranch. He told her of the hard years, the lost baby, the drought that had forced him to take work on cattle drives while Abigail maintained their small homestead. "She was so strong," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Stronger than me in many ways. Her faith sustained her through everything." "And yet she loved you with all your doubts and questions," Amelia observed. Yates looked at her, surprised. "How did you know about my doubts?" She smiled gently. "You're carrying a Bible you can barely bring yourself to read. It doesn't take much to see you've had a complicated relationship with faith. Abigail always said God was patient, that he'd wait for me to find my way back." He sighed. "I just never thought I'd have to find my way back without her." Amelia reached over and took his hand, a simple gesture of comfort that meant more than words could express. As spring turned to summer, Yates found himself becoming part of Promise Creek. He helped raise a barn for a family outside town, joined the volunteer fire brigade, and even attended the small church on occasion, sitting in the back pew with the Bible in his hands. And every day, he read a little more of Abigail's Bible, tracing her handwriting with his fingers, learning to find comfort rather than pain in the memories it evoked. His feelings for Amelia grew steadily, taking him by surprise with their depth and intensity. He found himself noticing small things about her, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was thinking, the dimple that appeared when she really smiled, the gentleness with which she treated everyone from the town drunk to the banker's wife. But guilt held him back from expressing these feelings. How could he love another woman when he had failed the first? How could he honor Abigail's memory while his heart was turning toward someone new? The answer came on a warm August evening. Yates was sitting on the small porch of the room he now rented permanently above the livery stable, reading the Bible by lantern light. He had reached the book of Ecclesiastes and was struck by a passage. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under heaven. In the margin beside it, Abigail had written, "Even grief has its season, my love. Don't stay there too long." Yates stared at the words, written in her familiar hand, feeling as if she were speaking directly to him across the chasm of death. Had she known somehow? Had she anticipated his grief, his guilt, his inability to move forward? A knock at his door startled him from his thoughts. He opened it to find Amelia standing there, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "I'm sorry to disturb you," she said, "but I needed to talk to you and it couldn't wait until morning." Yates stepped back to let her in, concerned by her serious expression. "What is it? Is something wrong?" Amelia took a deep breath. "My brother in Denver has offered me a partnership in his business there. It's a good opportunity, better than I could ever hope for here in Promise Creek." Yates felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "You're leaving?" She nodded, not quite meeting his eyes. "I've been considering it for a while. The store does well enough, but Denver is growing so quickly. There would be more opportunities there." "When would you go?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "End of the month. I've already found someone willing to buy the store." Yates turned away, struggling to process the emotions churning inside him. The thought of Promise Creek without Amelia seemed impossibly bleak. "I wanted you to know first," she said softly, "before I told anyone else." "Why?" he asked, turning back to face her. Her eyes met his, vulnerable and honest. "Because your opinion matters to me, because I care about what you think, because—" She faltered. "Because what?" "Because I've grown to care for you, Yates, more than I should, perhaps." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "And part of me was hoping you might give me a reason to stay." The words hung in the air between them, a confession and a question all at once. Yates felt his heart racing, hope and fear battling within him. On the table behind him, the Bible lay open to Ecclesiastes, Abigail's words visible in the margin. "Even grief has its season, my love. Don't stay there too long." In that moment, Yates knew what he needed to do. He stepped forward and took Amelia's hands in his. "I can give you a dozen reasons to stay," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "But the most important one is that I love you, Amelia Matthews. I didn't expect it. I wasn't looking for it. But somehow you brought me back to life when I thought that part of me was dead and buried." Tears filled her eyes. "What about Abigail?" Yates reached for the Bible and held it between them. "Abigail would want me to live again, to love again. She as much as told me so right here." He showed her the passage and the note in the margin. Amelia read it, her fingers gently tracing Abigail's handwriting. "She sounds like she was a remarkable woman." "She was," Yates agreed, "and she would have liked you very much." "I wish I could have known her," Amelia said sincerely. "In a way you can," Yates replied, looking down at the Bible. "She put so much of herself into these pages. Her thoughts, her questions, her faith. Reading it has been like having conversations with her again." Amelia looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears and something else, hope, perhaps. "And what would she say about us, about how you feel?" Yates smiled, the expression coming easier now than it had in years. "She would say that love is never wrong, that opening your heart again isn't betrayal, it's healing." He took a deep breath and asked the question that had been growing in his heart. "Will you stay in Promise Creek, Amelia? Will you give us a chance to see where this feeling between us might lead?" Her answer was to rise on tiptoe and press her lips gently to his. The kiss was sweet and full of promise, a beginning rather than an ending. When they parted, Amelia's smile was radiant. "I think Denver can wait. I have something much more important right here." As summer turned to fall, Yates and Amelia's relationship deepened. They took long rides into the countryside surrounding Promise Creek, picnicked by the river, and spent quiet evenings reading together, sometimes from Abigail's Bible. sometimes from books Amelia ordered from back east. Yates found work as the town's deputy sheriff, his tracking skills and steady temperament making him well-suited to the job. Amelia continued to run her store, expanding her inventory to include books and small luxuries that brought a touch of civilization to the frontier town. One crisp October evening, as they walked arm in arm under trees blazing with autumn colors, Yates stopped and turned to Amelia. "I have something to ask you," he said, suddenly nervous despite the certainty in his heart. "Yes," she prompted when he hesitated. Yates reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wooden box. "I know we haven't known each other that long, but when you find something precious, you don't let it go." He opened the box to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. "Amelia Matthews, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Her eyes widened, then filled with tears of joy. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Yates Xavier, I will marry you." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, she looked at him seriously. "But I need you to be sure." "I don't want to replace Abigail or erase her memory." "You couldn't if you tried," he said honestly. "She will always be a part of me, but loving you doesn't diminish what I felt for her. If anything, it honors her memory by proving that she was right that love is worth the risk, even when we know how much it can hurt to lose it." Amelia touched his face gently. "Then I will happily become your wife, and we'll build a new life together while honoring the past that made you the man you are today." They were married in the small church on the first Sunday of November. The entire town turned out for the occasion, filling the pews and spilling out onto the steps. Yates stood at the altar, watching as Amelia walked toward him in a dress of ivory silk, her honey-brown hair adorned with late-blooming wildflowers. Throughout the ceremony, he was acutely aware of the Bible in his pocket, Abigail's Bible, which he still carried close to his heart. But now it was a comfort rather than a burden, a connection to his past that gave him the courage to embrace his future. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Yates kissed Amelia with all the love and gratitude in his heart. As they turned to face their friends and neighbors, he felt a sense of peace that had eluded him for years. Life settled into a pleasant rhythm after the wedding. Yates and Amelia lived in the rooms above the general store, which they expanded to include a small lending library. In the evenings, they would sit together by the fire, talking about their day or reading aloud to each other. Yates still carried Abigail's Bible with him everywhere, a habit too ingrained to break. But now, instead of keeping it closed and tucked away, he often opened it, sharing passages with Amelia or quietly reading it during quiet moments. Winter arrived with a vengeance that year, bringing blizzards that isolated Promise Creek for days at a time. During one such storm, as wind howled around their snug home and snow piled high against the windows, Yates and Amelia sat close together on their small sofa, wrapped in a quilt. "Read to me," Amelia requested, nestling against his shoulder. From Abigail's Bible. Yates reached for the book which lay on the table beside them. "Any particular part, your favorite passage," she suggested. "The one that means the most to you." He thought for a moment, then opened the Bible to the Song of Solomon. "This was one of Abigail's favorites," he explained. "She used to say it was proof that God understood human love in all its forms." As he began to read, his voice low and tender, Amelia closed her eyes, listening to the ancient words of love and devotion. "Set me as a seal upon thine heart, as a seal upon thine arm," Yates read, "for love is strong as death." In the margin beside this verse, Abigail had written, "Stronger than death, I believe, love reaches beyond the grave." Amelia opened her eyes and looked at the handwriting. "She was right," she said softly. "Her love for you didn't end with her death. It changed you, shaped you into the man I fell in love with." Yates swallowed hard, touched by her understanding. "Sometimes I feel guilty for being happy again," he confessed, "as if I'm betraying her memory by finding joy with you. Do you think she would want you to be unhappy?" "No," he said without hesitation. "Abigail had the most generous heart of anyone I've ever known. She would want me to live fully, to love again." "Then honor her by doing exactly that," Amelia said, touching his face gently. "Your capacity to love again isn't a betrayal, it's a testament to how well she loved you first." Yates kissed her then, overwhelmed by gratitude for this woman who understood him so completely, who could embrace his past as part of who he was without jealousy or resentment. As winter gave way to spring, Promise Creek began to stir from its hibernation. The snow melted, revealing muddy streets and the first tender shoots of new growth. With the thaw came travelers, the first to reach the town since the heavy snows began. Among them was a circuit preacher, an earnest young man named Reverend Thomas, who brought news and mail from the larger settlements. He also brought word that he would be holding special revival services for the week he was in town. "You should go," Amelia encouraged Yates when he mentioned the revival. "You've been reading the Bible so faithfully. Maybe you'd enjoy hearing someone preach on it." Yates was hesitant. "I haven't set foot in a church service since Abigail's funeral, except for our wedding." "I'm not sure I belong there. The Bible you carry says otherwise," she pointed out gently. "Besides, I'll be right beside you." So on a mild spring evening, Yates found himself sitting in the small church, Amelia's hand in his and Abigail's Bible on his lap. Reverend Thomas was a passionate speaker. His sermon focused on God's redemptive love and the promise of new beginnings. As the preacher's words washed over him, Yates felt something shift inside him, a loosening of a knot he hadn't known was still tied. He glanced down at the Bible in his lap, thinking of all the times he'd carried it without reading it, holding on to his grief instead of the hope Abigail had found in its pages. After the service, as people mingled outside the church in the gentle spring air, Reverend Thomas approached them. "Mrs. Xavier," he greeted Amelia, then turned to Yates. "And you must be the deputy I've heard so much about. It's a pleasure to meet you both." "Likewise, Reverend," Yates replied. "That was a powerful sermon tonight." The young preacher smiled. "Thank you. I noticed you had a Bible with you." It's always encouraging to see a man who values the word. Yates hesitated, then made a decision. "Actually, Reverend, this Bible belonged to my first wife. She died several years ago." Understanding dawned in the preacher's eyes. "I see, and you've kept it with you all this time," Yates nodded. "I carry it everywhere. At first it was just to keep her close, but lately I've been reading it, trying to understand what she found in these pages." "And have you?" the Reverend asked gently. "I'm beginning to," Yates admitted, "but there's still so much I don't understand." Reverend Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "The Bible isn't meant to be understood all at once. It reveals itself over time, speaking differently to us in different seasons of our lives." He glanced at Amelia, who was listening intently. "Sometimes it helps to read it aloud to hear the words spoken." "Have you tried that?" Yates shook his head. "No, I've always read it silently. You should try it," the preacher suggested. "Words have power when they're spoken aloud. They become more real somehow." Later that night, as they prepared for bed, Amelia brought up the Reverend's suggestion. "What do you think about reading the Bible aloud? Would that be too difficult?" Yates considered it as he removed his boots. "I don't know, I've never tried. We could do it together," she offered. "I could read some parts, you could read others." The idea was appealing, but also intimidating. "Maybe we could start tomorrow," he suggested. Amelia nodded, understanding his hesitation. "Tomorrow it is." But as they settled into bed, Yates found himself reaching for the Bible on the bedside table. "Actually," he said, "maybe we could start tonight, just a short passage." Amelia smiled and sat up, lighting the lamp beside the bed. "What would you like to read?" Yates opened the Bible to Psalm 23, a passage Abigail had particularly loved. "This one," he said, pointing to the page where her handwriting filled the margins. "Shall I read it?" Amelia asked. Yates handed her the Bible. "Please." Amelia took a deep breath and began to read, her voice clear and gentle in the quiet room. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." As she continued reading, Yates closed his eyes, letting the familiar words wash over him. There was something different about hearing them spoken aloud, especially in Amelia's voice. They seemed to take on new dimensions, new depths of meaning. "Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life," Amelia read, "and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." When she finished, there was a moment of profound silence. Yates opened his eyes to find her looking at Abigail's handwritten notes. "She wrote that this was the psalm that sustained her while you were away on cattle drives," Amelia said softly. "That she would recite it to herself on lonely nights and feel less alone. Tears pricked at Yates's eyes. She never told me that. Maybe she didn't want you to worry about her, Amelia suggested. Look, she wrote here, God watches over him when I cannot. This comforts me. Yates's throat tightened with emotion. He reached out and took the Bible from Amelia, looking at Abigail's familiar handwriting through blurred vision. I was so wrong, he whispered. Wrong about what? Amelia asked, her hand warm on his arm. All this time, I've been carrying this Bible as a reminder of my guilt that I wasn't there when she needed me most. He traced Abigail's handwriting with his finger. But she wasn't afraid or alone. She had her faith. She had this. Amelia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. She had you too, Yates, in her heart, just as you've carried her in yours. That night marked a turning point. From then on, Yates and Amelia made a habit of reading from Abigail's Bible together each evening, taking turns reading aloud while the other listened. They would discuss the passages, share their thoughts, and sometimes pray together. Yates found that hearing the words spoken in Amelia's voice helped him connect with them in a way he hadn't before. And sharing Abigail's notes and observations with Amelia felt right, a way of honoring her memory while building something new. Spring turned to summer, and with it came news that filled their home with joy. Amelia was expecting a child, due in the winter. Yates was overwhelmed with happiness and a renewed sense of purpose. He threw himself into preparing for the baby, expanding their living quarters above the store and crafting a cradle from pine wood with his own hands. As Amelia's belly grew round with their child, Yates found himself turning more and more to Abigail's Bible, seeking guidance for this new journey of fatherhood. He read passages about children being a blessing from the Lord, about the responsibilities of parents, about the legacy of faith passed from one generation to the next. One evening in late September, as they sat on their small balcony watching the sunset, Amelia placed her hand over his on her belly, where their child was kicking vigorously. I've been thinking about names, she said. Yates smiled. Have you now, and what have you decided? Well, if it's a boy, I thought perhaps we could name him after your father, but if it's a girl, she hesitated. If it's a girl, I was wondering how you would feel about naming her Abigail. Yates looked at her in surprise. You would want to do that, Amelia nodded, her eyes serious. She was an important part of your life, Yates, and in a way, she brought us together. Without her Bible, without your grief that led you to Promise Creek, we might never have met. Yates felt a surge of emotion so strong it momentarily robbed him of speech. When he could finally speak, his voice was rough with feeling. I think that would be a beautiful tribute, but are you sure? I'm sure, Amelia said firmly. Our daughter should know where she came from, all of it, the love that came before and the love that made her. Yates pulled her close, overwhelmed by the generosity of her heart. Abigail Matthews Xavier, he said softly. It has a fine sound to it. As Amelia's time grew near, winter once again wrapped Promise Creek in a blanket of snow. The town had grown over the past year, with new businesses opening and new families settling in. Yates had been promoted to full sheriff after the old one retired, and he took his responsibilities seriously, especially with a child on the way. Amelia had hired an assistant for the store so she could rest more as her pregnancy advanced. But she still insisted on keeping the books and ordering stock, working from a comfortable chair behind the counter. It was there that her labor began, on a cold December morning with snow falling gently outside the windows. Yates was making his morning rounds when one of the customers from the store came running to find him. Sheriff, your wife's time has come. The midwife's been sent for. Yates didn't remember the run back to the store, only the fear that gripped him and the prayer that repeated in his mind. Please, God, keep them safe, both of them. By the time he arrived, Amelia had been moved upstairs to their bedroom. The midwife, Mrs. Holloway, was already there, her capable hands preparing the things she would need. Is she all right? Yates asked anxiously. She's doing fine, Mrs. Holloway assured him. First babies take their time. You might as well make yourself comfortable. It could be a long wait. But Yates couldn't sit still. He paced the small living area, occasionally approaching the bedroom door only to be shooed away by Mrs. Holloway. As the hours passed and Amelia's labor intensified, he found himself reaching for Abigail's Bible, seeking comfort in its familiar weight and the words within. He opened it randomly, and his eyes fell on a passage from Isaiah. "Fear not, for I am with you, be not dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you, yes, I will help you, I will uphold you with my righteous right hand." In the margin, Abigail had written, "Even in our darkest hours, we are never alone." Yates ran his fingers over her handwriting, drawing strength from the words. Then on impulse, he moved to the bedroom door. "Mrs. Holloway," he called, "may I come in?" Just for a moment, after a pause, the door opened slightly. "She's resting between pains," the midwife said. "You can have a few minutes." Yates entered to find Amelia lying in their bed, her face flushed and hair damp with sweat. Despite her obvious exhaustion, she smiled when she saw him. "Yates," she breathed, reaching for his hand. He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, taking her hand in his. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm being torn in two," she admitted with a weak laugh. "But Mrs. Holloway says everything is progressing as it should." Yates brought her hand to his lips. "You're the strongest person I know, Amelia Xavier," her eyes filled with tears. "I'm scared, Yates. What if something goes wrong?" He hesitated, then reached into his pocket for the Bible. "I found something I thought might help," he said, opening it to the passage he had just read. "May I read it to you?" Amelia nodded, her eyes on his face. Yates began to read the passage from Isaiah, his voice steady despite the fear in his heart. As he read, he saw some of the tension leave Amelia's face, her breathing becoming more even. When he finished, he showed her Abigail's note in the margin. "Even in our darkest hours, we are never alone." Amelia's fingers traced the handwriting. "She's with us today, isn't she? In a way." "I believe she is," Yates said, surprising himself with how true the words felt. "Watching over us, over you and the baby." Just then, another contraction began. Mrs. Holloway stepped forward. "Time for you to wait outside again, Sheriff. Your wife has work to do." The labor lasted well into the night. Yates continued his vigil, alternating between pacing and reading from the Bible, drawing strength from both Abigail's notes and the sacred text itself. Finally, as the first gray light of dawn crept through the windows, a new sound broke the silence, the lusty cry of a newborn baby. Yates froze, his heart pounding, as Mrs. Holloway opened the bedroom door, her face wreathed in smiles. "Congratulations, Sheriff Xavier," she said. "You have a beautiful daughter." Yates stood on shaky legs. "And Amelia, tired but well. She's asking for you." He entered the bedroom to find Amelia propped up on pillows, her face radiant despite her exhaustion. In her arms was a tiny bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Come meet your daughter," she said softly. Yates approached the bed as if in a dream. When Amelia pulled back the blanket to reveal the baby's face, he felt his heart expand in his chest, making room for this new, overwhelming love. "She's perfect," he whispered, reaching out to touch the downy head with trembling fingers. "Would you like to hold her?" Amelia asked. Carefully, as if handling the most precious treasure in the world, Yates took his daughter in his arms. She was so small, so incredibly perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and tiny features that he searched for resemblances to himself and Amelia. "Abigail," he said softly, testing the name. The baby's eyes, still unfocused, seemed to look toward his voice. "Abigail Matthews Xavier." "Welcome to the world, little one." Amelia watched them with tears in her eyes. "She would be honored, I think. You're Abigail." Yates nodded, too full of emotion to speak. He sat on the edge of the bed, cradling his daughter in one arm while reaching for Amelia's hand with the other. "Thank you," he said when he could finally find his voice. "For our daughter, for understanding, for everything." In the weeks that followed, Yates and Amelia adjusted to life with their infant daughter. The winter was harsh, but their home remained warm and filled with love. Yates took to fatherhood with a devotion that surprised even him, spending hours holding little Abigail, talking to her, singing the old songs his own mother had sung to him. Each night, after the baby was asleep, Yates and Amelia would continue their ritual of reading from the Bible together. Now, though, they often selected passages about children, about legacy, about the future. One evening in late January, as a blizzard raged outside, Yates sat in the rocking chair he had crafted, holding his sleeping daughter while Amelia prepared for bed. "She looks more like you every day," he observed, studying the tiny face. "She has your nose, Amelia smiled as she brushed her hair. But your eyes, I think, at least they're getting darker. Yates stroked the baby's cheek with one finger. I never imagined I could love someone this much, he said softly. Not after. He trailed off, but Amelia understood. Not after Abigail, she finished for him. It's all right to say her name, Yates. She's a part of our family. Yates nodded, grateful once again for his wife's understanding heart. Sometimes I wonder what she would think of all this, of you, of the baby. Amelia set down her brush and came to kneel beside the rocking chair. I think she would be happy that you found love again. That you have a family again. I think so too, Yates said. He glanced at the Bible that now resided permanently on the small table beside the rocking chair. You know, there's something I've been thinking about. What's that? I've never asked you to read the Bible to me. Always the other way around. Amelia tilted her head. You'd like me to read to you, to us, he corrected, looking down at their daughter. To me and Abigail, I think it's time. Understanding dawned in Amelia's eyes. She rose and picked up the Bible, then settled in the chair opposite Yates's rocker. Any particular passage, Yates thought for a moment. The 23rd Psalm, he decided, the one we read that first night together. Amelia nodded and found the page, taking note of the extensive marginalia in Abigail's hand. She cleared her throat and began to read, her voice clear and melodious in the quiet room. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters. As she read, Yates closed his eyes, cradling his daughter close to his heart. He felt a profound sense of peace wash over him, a feeling of rightness and completion. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. When Amelia finished reading, she looked up to find Yates watching her with eyes filled with love and gratitude. Thank you, he said simply. She closed the Bible gently. For what? For reading, for understanding, for giving us a future I never thought I'd have again. Amelia set the Bible aside and came to them, placing one hand on the baby's head and the other on Yates's cheek. We've given that to each other, she corrected softly. All three of us. And Abigail, too, in her way. As the blizzard raged outside and their daughter slept peacefully in his arms, Yates Xavier knew with absolute certainty that he had found his way home. Not to a place, but to people, to Amelia, to their daughter, and to the faith that had sustained Abigail through her own journey. The Bible that had once been a burden of grief was now a bridge between past and present, between loss and renewal. In its pages, he had found not only Abigail's voice, but his own path forward, a path that had led him to this moment of perfect contentment, surrounded by love that was both old and new, both remembered and discovered. As Amelia leaned down to kiss him, Yates felt the final pieces of his heart mend into something stronger than before, not despite the breaks, but because of them, like gold filling the cracks in precious porcelain. Read to me again, he whispered against her lips. Read to us. And as Amelia took the Bible once more and began to read aloud beside him, Yates knew that this moment, this family, this love was the answer to a prayer he hadn't known how to pray, the fulfillment of a promise written long ago in the margins of a well-loved book. The years that followed were filled with joy and the everyday challenges of family life. Promise Creek continued to grow, transforming from a frontier settlement into a proper town with a school, a bank, and even a small hospital. Yates remained sheriff, earning a reputation for fairness and steady judgment that made him respected throughout the territory. Amelia expanded the general store into a thriving business that supplied not only Promise Creek, but also the smaller settlements nearby. The lending library she had started became so popular that eventually the town council voted to establish a proper public library, with Amelia serving on its board. Little Abigail, called Abby by everyone except her father, grew into a spirited child with her mother's honey-brown hair and her father's thoughtful nature. From her earliest days, she loved hearing stories, especially from the Bible that held such special meaning for her family. When Abby was 5, the family welcomed a son they named Daniel, after Yates's father. 2 years later, twins Sarah and Samuel completed their family, bringing joyful chaos to the Xavier household. Through it all, the ritual of reading from Abigail's Bible remained a constant. What had begun as a way for Yates to connect with his past had evolved into a family tradition that bound them together and anchored their days. As the children grew old enough to understand, Yates and Amelia shared with them the story of their father's first wife, the woman after whom Abby was named. Far from being confused or troubled by this knowledge, the children accepted it as part of their family history, another thread in the tapestry of their lives. Abby, in particular, formed a special connection to her namesake. She would often page through the Bible, tracing the handwritten notes with her small fingers, asking questions about the woman who had written them. "Was she pretty, Papa?" 7-year-old Abby asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "Very pretty," Yates confirmed, his voice gentle with memories. "She had golden hair and blue eyes that crinkled when she smiled." "Like mine?" Abby asked, touching her own honey-brown hair. "No, sweetheart, your hair is beautiful like your mama's." Abby considered this. "Do you think she would have liked me?" Yates pulled his daughter onto his lap. "She would have loved you very much, just as Mama and I do." The child nodded, satisfied. Then, with the directness of children, she asked, "Do you still miss her sometimes?" Yates hesitated, aware of Amelia sitting nearby, listening. "Yes," he admitted. "Sometimes I do, but not in a sad way anymore, more like the way you might miss the sunshine on a rainy day, knowing it will come again." Abby leaned against his chest, content with his answer. "I'm glad you found Mama after she died. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here." "That's very true," Yates said, hugging her close, "and I can't imagine a world without my Abby in it." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Yates found Amelia sitting up in bed, reading by lamplight. She looked up as he entered, her eyes warm with love. "You handled that beautifully today," she said. Abby's questions about Abigail. Yates sat on the edge of the bed. "I've always believed in telling the children the truth. They're resilient, and they deserve to know where they came from." "I agree," she set aside her book. "You know, I've been thinking about something Abby said about being glad you found me after Abigail died." "Oh," Amelia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "It struck me that I've never properly thanked her." "Thanked who? Abby?" "No," Amelia said softly. "Abigail, for loving you first, for keeping her faith through difficult times, for leaving her Bible behind for you to carry all those years until you found your way to Promise Creek." She reached for his hand. "In a way, she led you to me." Yates felt a lump form in his throat. "I've thought the same thing many times. The Bible says that love is stronger than death," Amelia continued. "I believe that's true. Abigail's love for you didn't end when she died. It changed form, perhaps, but it continued to shape your life, our lives, in ways none of us could have imagined." Yates pulled her into his arms, overcome with gratitude for this woman who had embraced his past as part of their present, who had helped him transform grief into gratitude. "I love you, Amelia Xavier," he whispered against her hair. "More than I have words to say." "I know," she replied simply. "And I love you, all of you, the man you were, the man you are, and the man you're still becoming." Time continued its steady march. The children grew taller, the town prospered, and Yates's hair began to show threads of silver at the temples. The 19th century drew to a close, bringing with it new inventions, new challenges, and new opportunities. Through it all, Abigail's Bible remained at the center of the Xavier family's life. Its leather cover grew softer with handling, its pages more delicate. But the words inside, both printed and handwritten, retained their power to comfort, challenge, and inspire. On the 25th anniversary of their marriage, Yates surprised Amelia with a special gift, a new family Bible, large and beautifully bound, with their names and wedding date embossed on the cover. "It's beautiful," Amelia said, running her fingers over the tooled leather. "But what about Abigail's Bible? That will always be ours too," Yates assured her. "But I thought we might start a new tradition. This Bible is for our children and grandchildren to come, a place for our family to record its history, just as Abigail recorded her thoughts in hers." Together, they opened the new Bible to the family record pages at the front. There, Yates had already begun the entries. Yates Xavier, born April 12, 1844, married to Abigail Elizabeth Reynolds, June 3, 1867, deceased October 17, 1875. Married to Amelia Grace Matthews, November 5, 1878. Amelia's eyes filled with tears as she read the careful notation. You included her. Of course, Yates said simply. She's part of our story. Amelia leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. Do you know what today is besides our anniversary? Yates thought for a moment. No, what? It's exactly 27 years since you rode into Promise Creek with a Bible in your pocket and grief in your heart. Yates was silent for a moment, calculating. She was right, it had been 27 years since that dusty afternoon when he'd arrived in town, certain he was just passing through. I had no idea then what was waiting for me here, he said. No idea that life could be so full again. God knew, Amelia said softly. And perhaps Abigail knew too, in some way we can't understand. That night, as had become their custom on special occasions, they read together from Abigail's Bible. But this time, instead of Yates or Amelia reading, they invited their children to participate, each taking turns reading a verse or passage that held special meaning for them. Abby, now a poised young woman of 24 and recently engaged to the town doctor's son, chose the passage from Song of Solomon that had been Abigail's favorite. Daniel, at 19 studying law in Denver, selected a passage from Proverbs about wisdom and understanding. The 17-year-old twins, Sarah and Samuel, chose verses about faith and courage. As Yates listened to his children's voices reading the ancient words, some marked by Abigail's handwriting, some by notes he and Amelia had added over the years, he felt a profound sense of continuity of faith, love, and family extending backward into the past, and forward into a future he would not see but had helped to shape. Later, when the children had gone to bed and he and Amelia were alone, Yates took her hand and led her out onto the porch of the home they had built years ago when the apartments above the store became too small for their growing family. The night was clear, the stars brilliant in the vast Wyoming sky. In the distance, the lights of Promise Creek twinkled like earthbound stars, a community that had become home in every sense of the word. 27 years, Yates mused, his arm around Amelia's waist. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I rode into town. Other times it feels like another lifetime entirely. In a way, it was another lifetime, Amelia said, the life before us. Yates nodded, thinking of the bitter, grief-stricken man he had been, carrying Abigail's Bible like a burden rather than the gift she had intended it to be. You know, he said, I've been thinking about something Reverend Thomas said all those years ago about the power of reading the Bible aloud. I remember, Amelia said. That was the night we started reading together. Yes, he said that words have power when they're spoken aloud, that they become more real somehow. Yates looked out at the star-filled sky. I think he was right, but not just about the Bible, about everything. What do you mean? When we speak our stories aloud, our joys, our sorrows, our hopes, they become more real. They connect us to each other in ways that silence can't. Amelia leaned into him. Like the way you finally told me about Abigail, the way we've shared her story with our children. Exactly. Yates turned to look at her, this woman who had taught him to live again, to love again. In the moonlight, he could see the silver threads in her honey-brown hair, the laugh lines around her eyes, marks of a life well lived, a life they had built together. Thank you, he said simply, for listening when I was finally ready to speak, for reading with me when I couldn't read alone, for creating a new story with me that honors the old one without being limited by it. Amelia reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the contours she knew so well. That's what love does, she said. It creates space for all of who we are, past, present, and future. As they stood together under the vast Wyoming sky, Yates thought of the journey that had brought him to this moment, a journey that had begun in grief, but had led to joy beyond anything he could have imagined. The Bible he had carried everywhere, first as a burden and then as a bridge, had become a foundation for something beautiful and enduring. And as Amelia rested her head on his shoulder, her presence as familiar and essential as his own heartbeat, Yates Xavier knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be, home, in every sense of the word, with the woman who had taught him that love, indeed, was stronger than death.